We'll now begin with the questions. I'll recognize myself to start. Mr. Johnson, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm concerned with your fiscal 2024 request reduction of approximately $560 million in ICE's base budget to decrease detention bed capacity from an average daily population of 34,000 to 25,000. Firmly believe that an average daily population of 34,000 is already insufficient, and this request simply exacerbates the enforcement challenges that already exist. Yes or no, Mr. Johnson, do you believe that detention is a deterrent to illegal immigration?
I think it can be, yes.
Then why is the administration requesting fewer beds?
So the 25,000, as I understand it, that's in our base budget, and the additional 9,000 beds would be immediately available as part of this contingency plan. When I became aware that there was this possibility that we might have to take beds offline, come October 1, and then there would be some expectation of quickly bring beds on. I was assured that as long as we are hitting a certain threshold on September 30, that funding would be immediately made available to ICE. So unless something has changed, it is my understanding that we will not have to take beds offline, only to have to bring them back on.
How many beds are currently inaccessible due to COVID protocols, litigation, cohorting, etc.? How much have we paid for beds since the beginning of fiscal year 2023 that we aren't able to use due to these aforementioned reasons?
We're using about 73% of our capacity right now, and this is largely, as you described, due to COVID and some of the safeguards put in place by the CDC. We are hopeful that on May 11, when the Title 42 emergency declaration is over, that there will be new CDC guidance that gives us greater flexibility to use more of the beds that we are paying for at our facilities.
So will you commit then to no longer taking beds offline due to COVID reasons after the public health emergency ends on May 11th?
I will commit to following whatever the CDC guidance is as it relates to detaining individuals in congregate settings. If CDC completely lifts the requirement and there are no restrictions like pre-COVID, then I will commit to getting back up to 34,000 beds. But it's really dependent on where CDC lands with their new guidance, if there is new guidance.
Secretary Mayorkas said he cannot comply with the Immigration and Nationality Act requirement to detain all eligible migrants. As head of the agency responsible for that, what is required for this administration to comply with the law?
More beds than probably exist in the public sector and funding that we don't have. I mean, on any given year, even before COVID, we could only detain about 200,000 people a year, maybe in some of the better years up to 250,000 in a given year. So you do have to make tough choices on how to use your resources. And if you're going to dedicate some beds for the southwest border, you're going to have to pick and choose which folks in the interior you choose to focus on. So that is not an entirely new phenomenon for ICE.
Didn't you just say that you're only at 73% capacity?
We are, and that's largely due to COVID today, correct.
What about alternative detentions?
What about it? What's our capacity?
Are you making full use of that?
We are. I mean, we're trying to get the numbers down a little bit to get in compliance with our FY23 funding. I think the goal was to try to get that down to about 170,000 participants by the end of the fiscal year. But given May 11, we expect that number will likely increase some.
Can you measure or explain to us how you measure the effectiveness of the alternative detention system?
Well, historically, it's been measured by whether or not an individual actually complies with their terms of release, whether they show up at all their ICE appointments and check-ins, whether they allow for the home visits and the like that are required by the ATD program or some participants in the ATD program, and most importantly, whether they show up at court for their hearings as scheduled.
Isn't it true that you stopped monitoring them within 30 days?
Not within 30 days, but it is true that it, just based on current funding levels and the extensive amount of time that it takes an individual to sort of have their case adjudicated before EOR, it is impossible to hold someone or keep someone enrolled in the ATD program for the entire period of their removal proceeding. So right now, I think the average length of stay on ATD is somewhere around a year and a half, 18 months. And as you guys are fully aware, it takes about 3 to 5 years to have an individual's case conclude.
I've exceeded my time, but I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Cuellar for any questions he may have.